Just a good word, y'all. DKB here. So moving into week 6, we have the Packers matchup. But prior to that, I did want to cover who the top 5 New York Jets were through the first 5 weeks of the season, kind of based on the performance, who's been contributing to the wins the most, etc., things like that. So this is kind of based off an article I read from Ryan Moran from Empire Sports Media, and kind of going based off his ranking and any changes that I would have made personally. So at number 5, he had DJ Reed. Number 4, Sauce Gardner. Number 3 is Breece Hall. Number 2 was Quinnen Williams. And number 1 was Elijah Vera-Tucker. Now, for the most part, I agree with this list. I think maybe certain pieces can be interchangeable, and maybe we can drop one of the quarterbacks in lieu of somebody else. But for the most part, the list is largely the same for me. Now, kind of reviewing the list that he had, DJ Reed being under Sauce Gardner, to me at this point in the season, I would say is overselling out Sauce Gardner maybe a little bit much. Absolutely respect and love his performance so far, and the only reason I would consider him a notch above DJ Reed would essentially be because he's competing just as well essentially as DJ Reed is, but as a rookie, coming in, having to go through the battle and the grind of the early seasons, adjusting to the NFL, having to move to a new city, all of the different behind the scene things that come with it, learning a new playbook, having to essentially be a young leader on the team that is already full of guys that are only essentially a year to 2 years older than you for the most part. It's absolutely nuts. And then you come in with this huge pedigree as a man coverage cornerback, and although our scheme doesn't necessarily parlay itself to playing in man coverage a whole lot, he's still built to be part of this scheme. And so him just holding up not only to his fourth pick first round draft status, but doing it early on, dominant and consistently, is a huge kudos. DJ Reed, though, I still would say has the leg up on him. Again, I talked about it a little bit before. He doesn't have any prototypical traits about him per se. Nothing that really would stand out if you lined him up next to 10 other cornerbacks in the NFL. And yet, he's turning in some of the most dominant tapes that we have seen, again, since like a Darrelle Revis. And he's doing it, ironically, and Sauce Gardner as well. They're kind of, we know DJ Reed is primarily playing on the right-hand side. Sauce Gardner may follow people to a certain degree. We've seen it in week 1 with the Ravens, where they switched him over to Mark Andrews for certain, pass sets. And yet, they kind of draw essentially a 50-50 coverage, depending on if the offensive coordinators really want to try to move some of their pieces around and see if they have a little bit more success, which has not been the case. So I love seeing Sauce and DJ Reed there at 4 and 5. Potentially, I would bump them up both one slot. Breece Hall, phenomenal. I think we're actually looking at a rookie that may come in and not only grab Offensive Rookie of the Year, not only probably grab a few more Offensive Rookie of the Week awards, but he could potentially be in that second All-Pro tier right away in his rookie season. But we're still, I want to kind of see some consistency with it. Obviously, this was his breakout game. I wouldn't say we should expect anywhere near 200 off-scrimmage yards every week, but as we've seen the offensive coordinator, Michael LaFleur, continue to bump up his snaps, we've seen him excel and excel and excel further and further. And you see him really adapting to the speed of the NFL, how players are going to try to defend him, what these schemes are doing, and really buying into, the rest of the offense, setting them up for success. So it was also interesting that I recently seen a comparison that said based off the build and the playing style, essentially, he compares favorably enough to Matt Forte, who we've seen for a season or two previously back in the day. And after thinking about it, I think it's legit. Obviously, he's a very interesting player in that you'll get a lot of different names thrown out there. Le'Veon Bell, Dalvin Cook, the list can go on and on generally, and you can say the same for a lot of other running backs. But when it comes to Breece Hall, I think the versatility aspect is what shines out. I've seen him win games in certain series and drives where he's just turning into a power running back. I've seen the other bit where he's played a little bit of that finesse role. You've seen other instances where he's put the burners on, and if it wasn't for maybe another block or two, or if he turned the corner maybe a bit quicker, things like that, you could have seen a couple more home run plays coming. So absolutely love it. However, I would say it hasn't been as consistent or as dominant per se as what we've seen from DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. At number 2, Quinnen Williams and Elijah Vera, number 1. Again, I think they could easily be interchangeable. I love where those two line up though in the rankings. Quinnen Williams is looking like he can finish top 3, especially with this increase in snaps that he's gotten. He's gotten at least a half sack in every game, essentially, and he's looking at career highs across the board, and that's even before the 10-15% increase in snaps that he was seeing over the last 2 weeks, which we hope continues against the Packers as well. And he's going out there and absolutely dominating people. And one of the things that I love to see even more was the fact that his double team percentage has increased. Teams have blocked him with 2 or more people. I want to say the number was 64% of the time, which is up about 9 or 10% from the previous season. And he's going off on people. So absolutely love to see that. When it comes to Elijah Vera-Tucker, though, this offensive line was something that was supposed to be a strength, potentially making us a top 10 unit in the NFL, and we've seen things crumple and go to the wayside very early. Mekhi Becton goes down. We see George Fant end up having issues. We come and sign Dwayne Brown. He runs into issues. Luckily, he's back. The list goes on and on. Connor McDermott gets injured early and kind of stays hampered a little bit throughout this entire time. And then we end up catching a break with Max Mitchell, who's looking like a hidden gem. And then he gets hit with an injury bug as well. And then we start plugging him into all of these pieces. He literally has played everything but center, and he's done it essentially at one of the top 15, performing as a top 15 player at any one of the positions he was thrown into. And there was a lot of headlines thrown out there, right? At right guard, obviously, we were expecting an all-pro season, and it looked like he was going to promise on that, deliver on that. He could have easily switched over to left guard if needed to either drop Tomlinson back, who's been woefully underperforming. He goes to left tackle, pulls in a dominant performance, and then he goes over to right tackle, and we find out he's actually never played right tackle, a single snap practice, etc. in his life. And he goes out there and he performs like a Pro Bowl player. So he couldn't be any more of an important piece for this offense, just for us to look like a top 15 offense that's in the NFL. And we're definitely heading in that direction. You can tell that things are starting to gel a little bit more. And kudos to Nate Herbig, too, who's been able to slide in a right guard and not be a hindrance to this offensive line. I would say, couple honorable mentions, because people look at this list and I assume there's going to be a few different names to go out there, but personally, honorable mentions for me would be Zach Wilson. For one, I think him coming in and essentially it didn't hit me till I heard somebody else say it. He really was on basically like a year layoff. It wasn't good. He hasn't played since the final week of last season. He gets his preseason practices and everything, but then he's out right again, and he hasn't seen a full NFL speed defense in quite some time. He comes back in and he's able to do the things that he's been doing, and he's doing it well. He's not costing his team victories. Will we like to see more touchdowns and things like that? Yes, but also keep in mind there was a bunch of opportunities where if it wasn't for a yard or two here or there, some of these big plays would have fell his way, and he's easily looking at being 5 or 6 touchdowns in this season. So those will continue to come, but I like where he's kind of settling into this game manager plus role, and I am literally calling it a game manager plus because worst case scenario, we literally have so many weapons that him being a game manager is different from the classic sense that we're used to hearing it in, which is basically don't be the reason your team loses. Our game manager with Zach Wilson and the tools that he has basically means go out there and let your team eat him being a game manager can easily on any given day mean that he's throwing for over 300 yards just by nature of the yards after catch ability of a lot of our players, or it can mean a dominant performance on the ground as a whole. You know, with the Miami game, we've seen us scoring 5 touchdowns, or it can mean a little bit more of a quiet game where maybe he doesn't actually have any major stats in the running touchdown or passing touchdown category, but he's still the main reason that we're facilitating our offense and putting points on the board. So respecting the role earlier in the season, he's still getting used to a lot of the players, still getting back into the rhythm of things. I think we'll still continue to see that evolve and what that'll end up looking like for us and our offense. My second honorable mention would be Bryce Huff. I think quietly you can point to him as a key vital piece for how our offense is turned around. Excuse me, how our defensive line has turned around. As soon as we were able to get him some snaps onto the field, we seen the entire defense look completely new. We're getting pressure. The cornerbacks holding up their coverage looks even better now, because even if we're not hitting home, you know, half of the time, we're definitely getting to the quarterback. We're affecting them. We're in their face 15 plus times a game, and you can tell that that's wearing and tearing on them. So Bryce Huff, I'm fully expecting, and he's sitting somewhere around about 37% of the snaps within these last 2 weeks. I'm fully expecting him to continue on that tear. Maybe we can bump him up a little bit more if we stifle some of Jacob Martin's and even, you know, a few more Nathan Shepard's snap attempts. But all in all, without diving heavily into stats, Bryce Huff, just watch the film. I mean, at this point, he's almost looking like he can make half of the snaps that he's on the field for pass rush opportunities be some kind of pressure, legitimate pressure, moving the pocket, even if somebody else is feasting off of it and he's not getting it himself. And I would probably say the last honorable mention for me, I want to say, is Quan Alexander. The linebacker core has definitely looked a lot different. I can tell why Jeff Ulbrich mentioned him essentially being the energy and the spirit of the entire defense, because when he goes out there and he makes some of those pops, you feel it. You can see the team immediately get hyped. The very next play generally turns out in our favor, and you can hear him constantly kind of, you know, through all 22 tapes, through the mic'd up players, different things like that, you can hear him kind of working through the communication piece, even though CJ Mosley is the guy for that. So it'll be interesting to also see what happens with Quincy Williams coming back. But and Robert Saleh's kind of mentioned too, he doesn't necessarily believe in players losing their starting position due to injury, but I think you can see a stark difference in CJ Williams' play. CJ Williams. You can obviously see a difference between Quincy's play and Quan when he's out there on the field, with him being the more experienced veteran and also having familiarity with the scheme. But just the juice and the energy that he brings definitely changes the entire outlook on this defense. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Do you have a different top 5? Is there a huge clear miss that we don't necessarily have at this point in time? The only other one I would probably throw out there and mention would be out of the wide receiver core, and it's a name that I didn't necessarily, it wasn't my first choice, but as I thought about it more and more, it would be Corey Davis. He's been technically consistent with explosive plays. Even though he gets the Butterfingers label, he's had some of the most clutch catches that we've needed in a lot of these comeback wins. And so at this point, it really looks like it's a smart move for us to keep him, rather than some of these trade rumors that say we may potentially move him by the November 1st deadline. But again, let me know what some of your guys' thoughts are regarding who this top 5, the top 5 players you have through the top 5 weeks of the NFL are. And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.